Hello, my name is Jeff Schneid with Diversified Fall Protection. Today's video topic are the various different types of engineered connections of both rigid post and tip-over post technologies for horizontal lifeline applications. The whiteboard illustrates both, and the first one we'll talk about is going to be the tip-over post technology. Tip-over post technology is a less invasive design to a rooftop, and the fact that it requires very little penetration through the roof. It requires 4 holes that would be drilled down through all the roof material and has a specially designed toggle connection at the underneath side. On a rigid post design, you would have to have a much larger opening, which is more invasive to the roof because you have to cut the roof open at this point, because you have to expose the structural materials on the underneath side. When exposed, there's different types of mounting. Typical type of mount would require some type of a weld to weld the base plate of the post to the structural member that you're attaching to. In a load reaction on a tip-over post, the load itself, it goes off in this direction, would actually take this post, and the post itself around the connection point here would rotate, and now your load would be down here. So normally, if you were up at 12 inches at this point, it will rotate down and put this entire connection into a shear orientation. In a rigid post design, the opposite happens. There is no tip-over technology to it. It's all rigid. So now what ends up happening, depending on what the distance is from the connection point to where the load is being applied, that adds to the amplification of load at the connection point. So therefore, you end up with a situation where you have rotation about the base in this orientation, creating tear out, and then you also have another load orientation creating compression down into the member. Various different types of attachments determine the type of connection point that you're going to work with. For instance, here we're showing that this rigid post design is welded to the top surface of the structural member. There's also the ability to go ahead and drill through the flanges and actually bolt to the underneath side of the top flange. And then there's also designs that allow us to put another plate to the underneath side, and then we create tie rods that come down through and sandwich it through the beam. The problem that you run into with this type of design is you have to have access to the underneath side of the beam, which means that this is located in a part of the building where there's a finished ceiling or a drop ceiling. A lot of times this is not accessible to the underneath side because this is no longer a one-person installation, this is a two-person installation. One to handle the heavy load of the rigid post on the top side, and another individual on the underneath side to go ahead and mount the lower plate. On tip-over technology, although what we're showing here is a standard built-up membrane roof with metal deck below, we're utilizing a toggle mechanism that basically the 4 holes that you drill down through will compress all the roofing material to the deck. If this was going to be used in a concrete deck, there are specially designed anchors that you embed into the concrete and you bolt down through those. We also have specific designs where the tip-over technology is used on a standing seam roof. So a typical standing seam roof is going to have ribs usually every 12 inches. Our base plate would have a mounting block that attaches to every other rib. The base plate mounts between the 2 of them, and then this would be the tip-over post mounted there. So now what ends up happening is we'll go back to the pros and cons. The pro of a tip-over post is less invasive to the roof. It provides you more versatility of mounting because you're utilizing the same components as you are on every installation, and it does not require any underneath or underside of the roof deck accessibility. It also has the shock absorption built in. So in the event of a fall, this post, when it rotates over, will absorb the load from the fall. Now, going into the rigid post design, keeping in that same scenario, when a fall occurs, the fall is always going to be whatever the distance away from the structural support, and therefore will amplify the load going back into the structural member. Where the advantages of a tip-over post, or of a rigid post, is the post itself can vary in height. And it also is used in applications where a metal deck, let's say that this is a standard trapezoidal type metal deck, the integrity of the deck does not allow us to attach to it because the deck itself is not going to allow itself to absorb the load. We would go to a rigid post design, and a lot of times what we'll do is we can vary the height of the post based on the application. And we strongly urge you to make sure that you're working with the proper fall protection partner, because safety is a culture, it's not a purchased product.